Handling the underperformance of a manager is always a tricky thing. And I think that we need to be concerned that we handle this in a way that is effective and compassionate and doesn't invoke fear, because of the negative impact that fear has on the ability of all people, and in this case managers, to be creative and to think clearly. And when people are employed as managers, we are employing them to think. When you have a manager reporting to you who's underperforming, it can be a real difficult thing to handle. I think for a start, there might be some ego issues. Did you make a wrong appointment? I think the other thing that happens when you're dealing with the underperformance of a manager is that it's that much more difficult to define what your expectations are. Your expectations are not the numbers on the scoreboard. That's the measurable or the indicator. The expectations really are to do with the behaviors that you expect from a manager that will produce the results that you're looking for in the fashion that it's expected. And so that's tricky, is getting clear on what those expectations are. And then the fact is that these are difficult conversations to have. You could lose your temper, but what is that going to do? You could do nothing. What's the impact of that? And let's not underestimate the amount of resentment that that causes when other team members see you doing nothing about an underperformer on the team. So how to deal with it without invoking fear? The starting point really is that the expectation must be clear in your mind. So you must be able to describe the behaviors and the routines that you are expecting that will deliver the score, if you like. You need to have clearly communicated this, and you only know that you've clearly communicated it if the manager that we're speaking of is able to explain to you what is expected in language that squares with the picture that you have in your head. That's the only thing that will tell you that you and your team member are on the same page, is if their description squares with yours. Then you also need to have had a series of conversations in which you are working with this manager to find solutions to the problem. First of all, obviously, to understand the problem, but then to find solutions to the problem. And every one of those conversations needs to end with that manager articulating to you what they're going to do and how they're going to go about it, and when and how often they're going to do it, and what they'll do if something goes wrong, and the measures that they'll put in place in order to monitor their own progress. And you will have articulated the impact if they continue to fall short. You then also need to monitor and give feedback on an ongoing basis. As I said, it's a series of conversations. So follow-up conversations would have a look at what they've implemented since the last time you spoke, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then you would move on to discuss the same topic if it hasn't borne fruit, or a new topic. There comes a point where you need to ask yourself, have I done everything that could reasonably be expected of me in order to get this manager's performance right? If it was a skill issue, did I do something to build that manager's skill? If it turned out that performance to the standard was punishing in some way, did I ensure that performance to the standard is actually rewarded or rewarding? If it turned out that underperformance in some way was rewarded, which sounds bizarre, but it happens, did I do something to turn that around? If there were obstacles to performing as required, did I do something to remove them? And have I been giving regular, ongoing feedback that shows that I'm paying attention? And you've done all of that, and there's still no change? Well, then it is time to get together with this manager again and talk about the next stages, because it can't go on forever. So what do you need to do? Well, the starting point is you need to get your mind right. You can't have this conversation in a sensible way if you are stressed, angry, and uptight. So first of all, get your mind right. Then you start the conversation by articulating the problem. This was the expectation. This is what's actually happening, and it's continuing to happen. And that is a real problem. Then you will articulate what you and this manager have attempted in order to put things right. And you'll list what you've done. You will then ask what else is required. And this is that manager's opportunity to tell you if there's anything else that needs to be done or can be done in order to support them in improving their performance. And you can debate whether or not that request is reasonable. If it's reasonable, then you might give them a little extra time. But if it's not reasonable, you get to the point where you need to say, well, we've reached that point where we are moving into a disciplinary process. We've been through a performance management process. It hasn't borne fruit. We need to move into a disciplinary process. But I am giving you one last chance to get this right. And if you don't get it right within a time frame, and you would determine what that time frame is, you draw the line in the sand, then you articulate that you're going to have to go into a disciplinary process. Now, there's a world of difference between a threat and making somebody aware of a logical, natural, reasonable consequence to ongoing performance. And you're doing it on the back of many weeks, maybe even several months of support and coaching. But when you do reach that point of no return where you need to implement a really tough decision, you need to do so knowing for yourself that you've done everything that can be expected. But it's also important that other people and this particular manager can see that you have gone above and beyond the call of duty. We're dealing with people. We need to make sure that we are doing right by them, even when we need to take some tough decisions.